Welcome guys to this video. Hope you're well. Today guys, we're gonna talk about a subject that honestly is one of the best subjects that I can talk about, that I really do enjoy. Something that I've become more and more passionate about when training and when doing bodybuilding. I thought that the video about the small muscles was, pretty well received, and that there is obviously some interest into this as well, as much as I like it. And so I really wanted to make a video about the forearm muscles. I think forearms are just a great muscle. They're the type of muscle that, someone asks me, what is the only muscle that you would train if you only had one muscle to train? I would say forearms, because they simply are a very aesthetically pleasing muscle. And if you only have, developed forearms, you don't look like an idiot. For example, if you only have like very developed legs or like a very developed chest and no other muscle that is developed, that would look weird. Jack's forearms actually are something that you will see most of the time in your life. For example, when you have like someone who works into, like a builder or like a physiotherapist, like, you'll see the guy having like massive forearms, and it's not because he only has like developed forearms that it doesn't look good. It actually enhances his physique. It makes him look more athletic in general. And honestly, when you look online, all these things about the forearm muscle, like honestly, so many people agree with this pretty much, that forearm muscle are what you could describe as a sexy muscle. I think personally, this is just an aesthetic muscle, and that it does make you look good for sure. And so I think that forearms are a very important muscle. And for example, this video will also be for non-gym goers, people who might not go to the gym. I think that obviously if they want to work at home, etc., forearms is an easy muscle to work out at home, because you don't need much weight to start developing them. And as well, obviously, it will set you apart from even the gym goers who go to the gym but forget about their forearms. And you could have more jacked forearms than like someone who goes to the gym, for example, who's been there for like 5 years. You've been training your forearms for 1 year, and because the other guy doesn't train them at the gym, then you have more jacked forearms than him. Like honestly, forearms are just like a great muscle because it's unique in a sense that a lot of people forget to train about it, yet the forearm muscle are one of the most aesthetically pleasing muscle. And so if you don't train them, you're really missing out. And if you train them, I think that you will set yourself apart from a lot of people, even the gym goers. And obviously, the earlier you can start giving them some attention, the better it is. So that's really what we're gonna talk about today, guys. The reasons why to train forearms, although I've already explained quite a lot, the reasons, but otherwise how to train them, to grow them, massive and veiny, because that's the title. How to choose your exercises, which exercises you're gonna choose to actually grow them, etc., etc., and a few additional bonus basically answers, like for example, are static exercises for forearms good? Is it better to do high reps or low reps for a small muscle like forearms, etc.? We're gonna talk about this right now. So if you don't want to be this guy anymore, obviously, who goes to the gym, has a better frame, but then you have someone passing by and this guy, like a builder, has like better forearms than you, you're like, why am I even training? This guy just have developed forearms and he looks more jacked than I am, although I go to the gym. You're here on good hands, and I'm gonna teach you how to grow your forearms. Obviously, forearms are pretty much a very visible muscle, because whatever you do, if you shake hands every day, etc., like your forearms are most of the time visible, unless it's winter and you're dead cold, then obviously your forearms are not showing. But most of the time, forearms are a muscle that is very visible, which is another good reason to do them. And they're one of the most aesthetic muscles there are, very veiny usually, and set you apart from a lot of people who don't train them. So can you grow forearms, and should you train them? Well, forearms are muscle, that might not sound very obvious to everyone, but because they're like a small area, and so some beginners might think, forearms is not, something they'll focus on. Like, obviously they're a muscle, so there is no excuse whatsoever not to grow your forearms. Your forearms, you can go actually pretty much a very long way with them. As long as you know how to train them over time and to progress on them. So I think the best way to start training your forearms is to understand, obviously, kind of like the anatomy behind it. I think that, you know, understanding what you're doing always helps you get better results, rather than me, you know, just telling, you know, do this exercise for this many reps and sets, etc. I think that obviously understanding a bit more what you're training is gonna help you, you know, perhaps focusing better on the parts that you're training, and simply that, you know, once you have this understanding of what you're doing, in my opinion, the results come better. So there are obviously 20 muscles within the forearms, like, you know, obviously small muscles within the bigger muscles that will, you know, give a name right now. I think there are actually 3 important parts in the forearms that you should, you know, really pay attention to. And within these 3 parts, there are, you know, smaller muscles, and, you know, the forearm muscle are like up to 20, which is quite a lot. Obviously, we would all give up if we had to work on 20 muscles separately. Gladly, it's not the case here. So there is the extensors, the flexors, and there is the brachioradialis that you want to train on. And you don't really want to neglect any of these parts, because from all angles, you know, this developed part of your forearms will make you look good. So now that we know that these are the 3 parts that you want to work on for your forearms, you want to basically give them focus and specialize with both, you know, the fact that you're going to spend more time training your forearms. This is something that obviously might, you know, sound logical, but honestly, if you actually want, you know, to grow big forearms, you have to give them more priority. We're gonna see that for people who don't have much time to train them, there is still a solution, but it sounds obvious to me that if you want to have big forearms, you're gonna have to somewhat give them more priority. And so this is, you know, specializing into something specific in bodybuilding, which is, you know, the priority of training forearms. You know, specializing comes at many levels. It could be like, I'm gonna start, you know, lifting, and I don't know if I want to do bodybuilding, powerlifting, CrossFit, whatever. This is specializing. You know, you choose where you're gonna specialize, and then obviously once you decide I'm gonna do bodybuilding, what do you want to focus on more? What do you want to specialize on? What do you want to become a specialist, you know, with? You know, for example, powerlifters, well, they have, you know, to focus and to specialize on bench press, deadlift, and squat. And in bodybuilding, you have to specialize kind of like, once you've built, you know, some base, you know, into what you actually want your physique to look like. And, you know, for example, if you want jacked forearms, then you're gonna become more of a specialist of, you know, forearms and try to train them more often. So you have to basically do the same thing here. You want to prioritize forearms training more, and you want to specialize also by choosing the exercise selection. So the best exercises possible that you're gonna use to grow your forearms to target this, you know, 3 parts that we talked about. So it's basically, again, you know, bringing us to the debate of, you know, quality and quantity. What should you do? Here, it's very obvious. You want to focus on quality exercises and then apply quantity basically to this quality. Once you have the good exercises, you will, you know, do sets on them, etc. And that's how basically you're gonna grow the forearms. So little sum up, you know, focus more on your forearms if you want them to grow, obviously, and we're gonna see how you can do this. And second, use exercises that will allow you this progression over time. Now, before getting into the exercises, obviously the title contains veiny forearms, so I want to touch on this, obviously. I think that obviously the veins are a very aesthetically pleasing thing into bodybuilding. When it gets too veiny, too vascular, as we can see, you know, today in the competitions, or like with the steroid era, sometimes that gets too much, the veins are too big, it's pretty gross, but veins have always been something nice in bodybuilding that is aesthetically pleasing, as long as it's not too much. And so obviously, if you're watching this channel, you're natural, you don't fall in this category where it's like too much. And, you know, veins look very nice. So how do you get veiny forearms? Well, to me, the most important answer is that it takes time, obviously, and that for forearms, not especially, I'll come back to it, but usually vascularity to me is a question of time. Basically, the more you train over time, the more you're gonna develop your vascularity, because simply, you know, doing all these sessions in these local areas of, you know, these muscles that you're targeting, you have, you know, more blood flowing into the veins, and you repeat this very often because you train, you know, for example, on a regular basis, almost like every day. And so obviously your veins are gonna get larger because obviously you pump blood into these areas more often than, you know, the casual person who doesn't go to the gym. And so obviously, you know, your vessels might get a little bit bigger over time. And you know, all the blood that you're driving when you're training, well, it goes through, you know, the veins, and so, you know, this gets bigger over time. I think also the muscle that you grow gets closer to the skin. So, you know, obviously, usually the more muscle you gain, if you don't gain much fat, the leaner you are. And so, because usually when you're leaner, your muscle are, you know, getting bigger and closer to the skin, and the skin is not that big because you don't hold much fat. And so, you know, the veins are basically being pushed by the muscle against the skin. And so the veins are gonna appear. So obviously being lean enough makes sense that you're gonna see your veins more, and training over time is what's gonna make you more vascular. So obviously it's a question of time. Although for forearms, you know, in my opinion, it can be a bit different. Some people straight from the start have veins because, well, first, you know, the genetic lottery, I guess some people are more vascular than others, that's just the way it is. But otherwise, forearms are not storing much fat. You know, obviously, if you compare the belly, the stomach with forearms, usually, you know, most of the time, you will always store fat on your belly rather than your forearms. The forearms are just not really store much fat. And obviously it depends from people to people, but obviously we can say that most of the time the forearms are not storing much fat, and that's why you can see people that are overweight with actually quite lean forearms, veiny forearms. It's because obviously it doesn't store much fat. So obviously it's not an excuse for people not to diet down, because anyway, for the vast majority, if you're overweight, you know, your forearms also get fatter, and, you know, to the extent you have veins, it's pretty rare. So you do have to obviously, you know, get leaner as a whole to have more veins on the forearms. So that's, you know, the explanation to veiny forearms. How do you get them? Well, get your forearms to grow bigger, train them over time, you'll get more vascular, and then, you know, obviously get leaner when the time comes, and you will have the veiny forearms, although you could have veins already straight from the start. And if you're in this position, then great, you know, that's one of your, you know, strong parts of your genetics, and you gotta enjoy it. So now let's get into all these basically that we described. You know, more massive and veiny forearms will come to simply, as I said, getting bigger overall on your forearms over time, to develop the vascularity, etc. So for that, we have to start training them. So again, I said priority is to obviously focus more on forearms if you want them to grow more. That only makes sense, and it's not because they're a small muscle that you can't do it. Now, which exercises should you choose? And, you know, how many reps, you know, high reps, low reps, etc. We're gonna talk about this now. So basically, what are good exercises first? Good exercises are exercises in bodybuilding which, you know, offer a stretch, and that's, you know, you can use more weight over time, you know, with these exercises that, you know, that stretch. You don't want to do exercises which don't stretch. It's important that you have this, you know, range of motion which allow a good stretch to grow your muscle over time with the weights that you're using that are progressing as well. So we're only gonna focus on exercises that offer this stretch. And once you have these efficient exercises, you just really wanna focus on them. Again, exercises, when you choose too many exercises which do exactly the same thing, there is not really a point. You're just losing focus. It's better to do more sets of an exercise that is good rather than try to do too many exercises. So here again, and for forearms anyway, you won't be able to do this mistake because there are not many exercises. So that's actually a good thing, because you can only focus on a few exercises and not fall into the mistake of having too many exercises for one muscle. For back, for example, you could say, well, have at least back exercises to target all angles. But here it's not really going to be possible, because anyway with forearms, you don't have many exercises. So that's a great thing, you won't fall in the trap. For forearms, I think the best you can do is literally to have one exercise per part that we talked about. There are 3 parts for the forearms. You know, have a good exercise that stretches this part, one good exercise for each part, and you will be enough, which means basically 3 exercises. So in my opinion, the best exercises to grow your forearms are simply wrist curls, wrist extensions, and reverse curls. I think with these 3 exercises, you can go a very long way, and you can actually specialize, meaning again that you will focus on these exercises. So you'll become, you know, because you only do them, you will get strong fast on them, and, you know, use these strengths then that you've acquired to, you know, do hypertrophy with these movements and actually grow faster. They sound like pretty stereotypical exercises, but hey, you know, they stretch. They're doing what we want. You know, the basics are always what works in bodybuilding, and so focusing on the 3 exercises is probably the best thing you can do. There are also exercises that are great for people who just want to train their forearms at home, for example, because you don't need much weight to actually progress with this exercise. If you're a beginner, for example, you know, it's like lateral raises for shoulders, for example. These are exercises where you can go heavy without actually having to have much weight, because just, you know, for example, 10 or 15 kg for like a beginner on lateral raises is a lot of weight, and so you can go such a long way with that. So, you know, that's a reminder that if you, for example, training at home and struggling to progress, focus on exercises which you can go heavy with, but not with a lot of weight. Now you have, you know, the best exercises, in my opinion, that you should train with for forearms. Again, there is nothing that I'm inventing here, but obviously the more you're gonna try to focus just on these and to progress on this, the better you're gonna be off, you know. So now we're gonna talk about the high reps, the low reps, what you should do for forearms. So there is a conception that obviously forearms should be high reps training, because obviously they're a small muscle. So, you know, you can't go too heavy. The range of motion is like small, so you can't go too heavy. And so you should do high reps also, because it might be hard to recruit the forearm muscle, because you know, the wrist extensions, etc., don't allow you to go target basically all the fibers of you know, the forearms, etc. But in my opinion, anyway, you know, implementing some strength work within a movement is always good, because you get stronger quicker, in my opinion, and so then you can reuse that strength with your hypertrophy, high rep type of stuff. So, you know, doing basically strength work is always something good to do, and I think that you should actually do it even for forearms. You know, you should train your forearms and your small muscle like you would train another muscle, you know, for your chest, for example, you know, meaning that you should still try to go heavy if you can actually do it. So obviously, you know, you will spend more time doing your back than your forearms, but you know, you should still try, if you can, to implement some strength when you're working out on your forearms. And so, you know, go into kind of like the lower reps type of stuff, and then go with the hypertrophy work and more high rep type of stuff. So obviously, some people who might not be able to do this is if their wrists are very sensible, you know, from a past injury or anything like this. You know, high reps, you can still progress on high reps as long as you measure. It's very important that you measure your high reps. Honestly, I'll talk about it in a minute. But basically, yeah, if your wrists are sensible, then, you know, you can go for high reps, and you know, you should be very careful and obviously try to warm up as much as possible your wrist, and, you know, really work on your mobility, etc. But for the people who are not, basically don't have sensible wrist, there shouldn't really be an issue if you do everything well, which is, you know, warm up well before you train your forearms, that you take care of your wrist, you really warm up, etc., and that you go progressively, gradually with the weight when you're warming up for your forearms. If you do all these things, you should not come in a position that your wrist hurt most of the time. If they do end up hurting though, you know, slow down, take a break from, you know, maybe doing some forearms, or do some reverse curl if they don't hurt you. Basically, always choose an exercise that won't go and hurt you with, you know, the injuries that you could have. You know, that's what exercise selection is. You choose the best exercises for yourself. So, but most of the time, honestly, for most of the people who watch this, if you do the right steps of like the warm-up, and that you're really aware of your session, that you're careful, etc., you shouldn't hurt yourself. If you take, you know, as well the bar nicely in the hand, in the middle of the palm, you know, you shouldn't hurt yourself, as opposed if you, know, take the bar like really here, and then it will put pressure on your wrist, etc. So all these good steps that you should follow will usually not hurt you in the long term, and so there is no excuse for the people not to go for lower reps on forearms, for example. So to me, lower reps on forearms don't mean that you should do doubles, because no, there is no point here. But, you know, for example, for reverse curls, you can definitely do sets where you go, you know, for 6 to 10 reps. And, you know, even for wrist extensions and curls, I think that, you know, 6 to 10 reps is not something that you can't do. I think that, you know, if you warm up well again, and you know, do all the good steps, you can actually go heavy on them. do some strength sets with your forearms, and then obviously towards the end of the session, go for higher reps, 20 plus, 20 to 100 reps. And that's where I want to come, that if you want to basically improve with high reps, for example, if you restart sustainable or you just prefer this, you can obviously improve with high reps. Everyone can improve with high reps, as long as you measure the reps that you do over time, that you really track them, because most of the people, they do measure reps when they're low, but they don't measure when it's high because they can't be asked, bothered counting. But they're really missing a lot of, important steps here. The more you measure, the better, you're gonna have track of your workouts and your progress over time. And if, for example, you do 52 reps on your, wrist curls, you really want to count them, so next time that you have to beat 52 to actually improve. If you never count the high reps and you just wait until it's burning and you don't know exactly how much you're doing, then you're never really gonna improve over time. So if you're someone who counts the low reps because it's easy to remember, you have to track them if you really want to improve. And especially for forearms here, where most of the people will do high reps, then if you're gonna be one of these people, you really need to track your high reps and really count them. At the end of the day, you can do low reps or high reps. I think that if you do some low reps, obviously that you try to go heavy and do some strength work, you will improve over time in the long run faster than if you only do high reps. I think the strength work helps you gain strength quicker, and then you can apply it to your hypertrophy work and your muscle will be bigger quicker. But obviously, that's a detail in the long run. You can actually also improve on high reps, obviously. Otherwise, some people who might feel some pain, etc., and can only train with high reps would give up on bodybuilding, which is not an option. And you can improve on high reps. You just have obviously to track well the high reps that you do. And that's pretty much it. You have to, to progress. I don't care if you do low reps or high reps, as long as you progress over time. That's the most important I can tell you. As long as you improve over time, that the reps and the sets, are growing basically, then you're fine. I don't care if you do low reps or high reps, as long as you're progressing. One of the last benefits of high reps, if you want to do high reps, obviously, is that, in my opinion, if forearms are like a lagging muscle, so you actually, might have pretty bad genetics on your forearms, the muscle is pretty short, etc. Doing very high reps can help you drive blood, in the muscle. And if you do this very regularly, so like not with with heavy weight, but you can do 100 reps, for example, or 150 with very low weight, you can, learn basically yourself how to feel this muscle better for like the heavier sessions. I think that, you can actually make muscle more responsive thanks to high rep. The fact that you're driving blood inside all the time by doing these very high reps will make them more responsive for your heavier session. So that's also another benefit of, for example, forearms. If it's a lagging muscle for you, you get it more responsive. You actually work on this weak part by, driving blood often in this area and making them more responsive, and you learning how to feel them more for the heavier sets. So high reps also in the 50 plus range can be interesting. So now, what kind of routine you can have for your forearms? Well, I will just say that, the most important, in my opinion, if you're obviously just training at home, you can train them, 3 times a week. Try to go heavy if you can. If you can't, do the high rep stuff that you track, and obviously try to buy more weight to actually improve over time. If you're someone who goes to the gym and actually don't really have time, because that's the issue is, some people, they actually would like to train forearms, but they don't really have time. Know that obviously if you only do 2 or 3 sets of forearms 2 or 3 times a week at the end of a session, obviously over 2-3 years of time, you will grow much bigger forearms if you do this regularly over time. Obviously, it's not the fastest way to grow forearms, but it's better than nothing, and I think you should do this. I think you should also do this on days that are, for example, after your biceps or your back, where your forearms are well involved. You don't want to do your forearms, the day before your biceps or the day before your back. That only makes sense that you bring these muscles together. Now, obviously, if you're someone who do have time to train your forearms, then, you want to spend more than 2 or 3 sets at the end of the session. You want to spend rather 5 or 10 sets. I think this will already be a very good start to, growing your forearms. And obviously, otherwise, a good thing you can do if you're advanced and you have plenty of time on your hand, is simply sometimes to come back for smaller muscles at the gym and actually spend 30 minutes to 45 minutes doing just forearms mixed with abs, for example. That could be something that you can do, but try to program intelligently. Basically in your program, the forearms, when you do them, you don't obviously want to tire another muscle because you've trained forearms. So you want basically to mix your forearms with back or biceps, and obviously not have the muscle competing with each other unless you have plenty of time on your hand and you can actually program in a way that yes, you can allow yourself to do like a full session of 30 to 45 minute forearms, and even if it's not on a back or bicep step. But basically programming intelligently is going to be important for you here. And if you like time as a gym goer, doing 3-4 sets at the end of the session of forearms, or try to superset them, can be a great idea towards the end of your session to if you look at 1 or 2 years over time, you will still see a massive difference if you implement them little by little. So that's, for the routine part, how you can program things. Now I'm gonna answer questions, bonus questions that I thought about that, could probably help you. So one of the first question is, should you actually do static exercises for forearms? So static exercises is just basically an exercise that don't stretch. And I think that for most muscles, you should, avoid exercises which don't stretch. Now I know a famous exercise for forearms, which is the wrist roller. When you're like this and you're gonna bring up the weight. I think that this exercise can still be interesting because I think you're still stretching as you go down and up, and you can actually scale this exercise as well. You can really scale it, you can put more weight over time, and so it doesn't make it a pointless exercise, and I think it's actually a funny exercise. So obviously the fun exercise shouldn't be a priority. The best exercise that stretch, etc. should always be the first ones, but building some resistance can be interesting. It can help you being stronger and actually resist to the burn better on your normal exercises for forearms. So the wrist roller is not such a bad exercise, but any other static exercise where you just have to hold, for example, the weights like this without doing anything, yes, you might feel a burn, but there is no point doing it, in my opinion. So avoid in general static exercises purely for muscle building. You want to have exercises which stretch, etc. Will your forearms grow if you don't bulk? So obviously here, I think that as in a general way, if you're someone who goes to the gym regularly and that, anyway you want to grow muscles, a slight bulk is always interesting to have some calories to fuel muscle, to grow them over time and to progress. I will say that, yes, obviously you want to bulk up if it's part of the general plan that you go to the gym regularly. If you don't really go to the gym regularly and you just train your forearms, I would not recommend bulking just for forearms, because I think it's you're probably gonna gain fat where you don't want, and if it's just for your forearms, it's really not worth it. I think you can still improve, obviously, if you don't especially bulk, because forearm training, if it's only this, is not very demanding next to like a back training, etc. So if you're only someone who trains forearms, then I don't think you should bulk, especially for it. You will still manage to improve without having to bulk, and it will probably save you from some problems, like the fact that you're putting some fat in areas that you don't work out, etc. So the answer is yes, bulk up, to grow your forearms if it's part of the general plan of you going to the gym regularly for all the other muscles as well. But if you only want to train your forearms, then I don't think you should especially bulk. But obviously, the bulk that you do for your regular gym sessions will obviously help you for your forearms as well, because it's more energy, it's more progress for you over time. It's just not worth it, I think, for the this detail of bulking if you don't train the whole body. Just focus on not bulking and a good exercise selection and trying to improve over time. If you just train your forearms, this will be enough. How long will it take you to get veiny and massive forearms? Well, as I said, the veins, you might have them straight from the start. So for some people, they might look jacked already because they have good forearms. for most people, I think that if you actually do focus on like the forearm training, especially specifically, you can actually have, you know, in 1 year, forearms that an advanced lifter who doesn't especially focus on forearms will build in like 4 or 5 years. So obviously you could, you know, and because no one trains forearms, you could actually you know, have impressive forearms to the general population within like 6 months on 1 year if you train them seriously. So, you know, again, this is something that you shouldn't miss out. Forearms are just such a nice muscle to work on. Another question, should you train your forearms every day? So I know this idea comes from the fact it's a small muscle. It might be hard to stretch, especially with exercises that are only wrist curls and wrist extensions or reverse curls. But in my opinion, if you mix heavy reps with high reps, you do enough sets that you know how to position yourself to really stretch. So for example, you know, when you do wrist extensions, you really want to be as parallel as possible to the floor, you know, to stretch the forearm more. Then, you know, if you do all these things, you do enough sets, you know, honestly, this will be enough. And I think that you will definitely recruit the whole forearm as long as you do, you know, these 3 exercises that we talked about, that you know how to put yourself in a nice position, that you're gonna be able to stretch them a little bit more than what the usual gym rat will do. And if you mix, you know, high reps, especially, you know, very high reps, sometimes, you know, 50 plus reps, that you also go heavy, you will definitely target them enough. And you shouldn't train them every day because it's just like any other muscle. They want to rest as well to grow. And plus, you actually, you know, use your forearms quite a lot when you do other muscles. And so if you train them too much, first, you're gonna damage the recovery for the most important muscle that are other than forearms, you know, on your body. And as well, simply your forearms won't recover as well. So I think that if you train them 2 times very seriously a week, it's better than doing them every day. So that's my opinion. Obviously, you can do them more regularly if you're gonna do the very high reps that I was talking about earlier in the video, where you don't go very heavy, but you learn to drive blood in there and to get the muscle responsive. But otherwise, honestly, training them 2, maximum 3 times a week if you train them pretty seriously is more than enough, and you shouldn't do them every day. Right guys, that was it for the video today. I'm just gonna say that obviously measure your training as much as you can for high reps, like I said. And you know, to track your progress of forearms, you can measure, you know, the size of your forearms and compare over time how it grows. You can take some pictures. You know, try to keep the same tempo when you do reps, whether it's heavy or whether it's light, because this way you can actually measure your progress better. You know, numbers talk more than anything else. And if, you know, you have a low number and then it becomes a bigger number, then you know that you've improved, and that's the most important. So in conclusion, guys, there is definitely no excuse not to grow incredible forearms. You know, forearms, while being a relatively small muscle, have a huge potential to grow and to impress. So whether you have, you know, forearms are skinny or developed, for starters, there is always a good way to improve as long as you focus on progressing and tracking your forearm training. Keep practicing the best forearm exercises and try to improve your weight, load and reps over time, and you will see the results. Pay more attention to forearm training if you want to see them grow. It's obvious. Program them intelligently as well in your weekly routine, so you give them enough recovery before training them again, and so that they don't impact negatively your biceps or back session and other muscles basically that you will train during the week. And you know, after a few months, you will start noticing obvious results. Forearms, you know, are one good aesthetic muscle that not a lot of people bother to train, so you could look more jacked than advanced lifters if you decide to build massive forearms. So honestly, think about it. If you generally like time to train your forearms, because, you know, that might be one thing that you actually, you know, like time for, train them as you can, you know, 2-3 sets at the end of a session, regularly, consistently over time. That's the best thing you can do, and you will still grow bigger forearms. So guys, that was it for the video. Don't forget about the forearms. You will not regret it, guys, once you have better forearms over time. They set you apart. They're very nice, aesthetically pleasing muscles, and so hopefully you pay tribute to this video that I made. I love forearms and I train them much more often now, and hopefully when I can train more, I will literally focus and like give them, you know, 30 to 45 minute training sessions just on forearms to grow these massive forearms and develop as much potential, natural potential as I can. And I hope one day you can do the same, or at least develop your forearms more, and that this video really helped you. So guys, feel free to like, share, subscribe, the questions in the comments. very important. If you have any questions, you know, feel free to leave it and I will try to answer as quick as I can and to help you the best I can in your training journey. See you later guys for a new video. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.